Doctor Who Series 4 is without a doubt one of the most beloved seasons of the show. With great viewing figures and usually at the top end of most fan rankings, it seems Series 4 excelled in creating a season of TV that worked for both massive fans and casual viewers. But did it? Is it really the show's crowning jewel, or is it overrated? That's what we're looking at today. This is Doctor Who Series 4. Genius or overrated? Okay, strap yourself in, because this is going to be a long one. As always, let's start with Christmas, and this time we've got the most Christmassy thing of all, an horrific real-life accident that claimed the lives of hundreds, but make it spacey. Voyage of the Damned takes place on a spaceship called the Titanic that sails through the stars, offering a luxury holiday cruise for those rich enough to afford it. Very quickly, the Doctor arrives and mayhem ensues as the show pays homage to the disaster movie genre. I've always liked it when media, may that be TV or film, go full in with a genre piece. Although subverting expectations can be fun, sometimes committing fully to one genre, utilising all the imagery and tropes and feelings that come along with it, can be just as entertaining and immersive. It's one of the reasons I love the film Crimson Peak. It's just a gothic romance through and through and delivers on those aspects beautifully. Voyage of the Damned does this too. With a high death count, grand setting and intense action sequences, the show embraces all that comes with this high energy genre. Although longer than a usual episode, it flies by, never dropping the pace even during its quieter, more characterful moments. It has everything that you'd expect from this type of film, with characters sacrificing themselves, a famous star as one of the leads, and a plot, though at times very flimsy, never fails to be fun. It really is the perfect story structure for Christmas Day viewing, with enough to entertain the whole family. Kylie Minogue is in this one, which is still an insane thing to say all these years later. I think I'm right in saying this is the biggest guest star the show's ever had. I can't think of another one that's on the same level of celebrity. And although a moment of ultimate stunt casting, make sure you say that right, Christ, it does work. She's pretty good in the role, and once again, this kind of casting makes perfect sense for Christmas Day. And it did work. This was the second most watched programme of 2007 with 13 million viewers, beaten only by EastEnders, a show with just as much death and robot acting. It's just an episode that oozes confidence, and you've got to praise the creative team for going full out on this one. The settings look great, the angels are so simplistic yet effective, the concept of them killing people with their halos is the perfect mix of horror and tongue-in-cheek that this era of Doctor Who balanced so well. You can really feel this is a series in its stride, unafraid to make big, bold decisions and to treat itself like an epic that deserves your attention. The episode does begin to lose itself towards the end. The last act definitely is the weakest, with a villain that doesn't fit the epicness of his story, and an ending that tries a little too hard to pull on the heartstrings for my liking. I can see why people liked it. I've said before that the general public love romance, especially at Christmas. But after many customer service jobs, I find the general public infuriating and believe they themselves should never know love. That being said, I know this is yet another romance, but I will give it a bit more of a pass than usual, just because it's fucking Kylie Minogue. If you have the opportunity for the Doctor to kiss Kylie and you don't take it, then you should be nowhere near the writer's table. It's just something that you'd be silly to pass up when writing one of the most flirty, horny, slutty doctors of the show. The romance doesn't really do much for me, but I understand why it's there. And for a one-off character, they do establish their relationship very quickly, which is nice. I understand why they fall for each other a bit more than I do some of the other flings of the Doctor. Is it a perfect episode of Doctor Who? No, I don't think it is. But is it perfect for what it's trying to be? A big show-off epic? Yeah, I think it is. I think it nails the tone, and I would love Doctor Who to explore more genres in the future. I think episodes homaging different genres would be a great way to keep the Monster of the Week format while changing it up a bit. You'd have to balance tone incredibly well so it still feels like the same characters in the same show, but it would be an interesting experiment that, if it worked, could really add something new to the series. A new series meant it was time for a new companion. Well, newish at least. Unlike previous series where we were introduced to a new character who over time we would grow to love, Series 4 took a different approach, returning to Donna Noble, who we last met in 2006's Christmas special, The Runaway Bride. This reintroduction is so effortless that it feels like it was always the plan. However, it wasn't. Originally, Series 4 was going to have a new companion called Penny, who, believe it or not, was going to have a romance with the Doctor. Fucking hell, Russell. I can't tell you just how glad I am that this never happened. One of the main things I like about this series is the theme of friendship, and the fact that so nearly didn't happen just shows how much romance became a trope of the show. Thank God Catherine Tate wanted to come back. I think the way they handled Donna's return to the show is really good. Originally, she was written as a comedy character for a special, and although she had some lovely little moments, you wouldn't think she'd be a rich enough character to hold her entire season. However, the show makes great effort to develop her early on, toning down some of her more intense traits from the special and allowing more natural, down-to-earth side to shine through. The relationship she's given with her grandfather, Wilf, we'll be talking more about Wilf later, I adore him, is such a nice way of giving Donna someone to care for while giving her someone who constantly roots for her, always wanting the best and believing in her in times when she doesn't. She's not completely different from her appearance in The Runaway Bride. She's still very funny, incredibly quick-witted with a kind heart, but it's all a little more layered, much more in tone with the season style of storytelling than the more in-your-face pacing of the Christmas specials. I think Partners in Crime is a fun series opener. It's a very traditional RTD era opening with a few lovely character moments and a few silliness thrown in for good mix. It does a good job at recapturing Donna and the Doctor's dynamic, which is played brilliantly by Tennant and Tate throughout. They've just got such a good energy when on screen together, and honestly kind of a gift for a writer to write for. You just know whatever you give them, they'll add this infectious charisma that will just elevate the scene. And let's be honest, it's lovely not to have a romance bubbling away. The fact they're just friends travelling is why the pairing is so good. It's a new area to explore for the 10th Doctor, a man who certainly needs friendship, needs someone to care about and someone to care and guide him. And it breaks the tiring mould of him either pining over someone or them pining over him. New ground for the era of the show. Huzzah! Never said huzzah before. I quite like it. Huzzah! But it's one aspect that Donna brings to the show that isn't just important to Doctor Who, but to storytelling in general. Storytelling lives and breathes tension and conflict. Conflict is what drives a story. It allows an audience to connect to and understand the characters and their motivations. Nearly every scene will have some aspect of tension. People usually misunderstand what that means. It doesn't mean like a blazing row or horrific death that has to be present in every scene, but there is usually something that guides us along. Conflict can be as big as a bomb about to explode, or could be as small as being late for a doctor's appointment. Now, the story structure of Doctor Who naturally has tons of conflict and tension built into it, with a protagonist fighting an alien in nearly every episode. I actually think at times the show tries too hard to make the biggest conflict ever, with far too many finals being end of the world, universe, galaxy based, which can become tired very quickly. However, what can sometimes be missing is the conflict between the Doctor and the companion. It feels very natural to make them friends, make them equals who travel around and have a laugh, and that's definitely part of the relationship. But it needs to be richer, with their differences being just as important as their similarities. And Series 4 gets this balance right, straight away. Donna is a more mature companion than what's come before. She's not easily blinded by the whimsy of the Doctor. She knows her own mind, has strong opinions, and doesn't ignore them. And this is most evident in the second episode of the series, The Fires of Pompeii. This episode is an odd one, and I don't see many people say that often, but tonally it's kind of insane. It's very jokey, almost sitcom-esque with its gags in the first half before switching towards a sadder, bleaker story at the end. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, by the way, it's just an interesting thing that the episode does that I don't see many people talk about. Almost from the off, Donna is desperate to save the people of Pompeii and can't quite believe that the Doctor is so against it. What I love about this is it's never played like Donna is dumb for not understanding the rules of time travel. Instead, she just couldn't care less. She sees people's lives as much more important than any Time Lord rules and never lets up on this, constantly trying her best to save someone. It's a really great way of doing a companion's first trip in the TARDIS. She's not awestruck by the wonder of it all, but instead horrified by its ruthlessness. And it allows the Doctor and the Donna to constantly spar with each other, growing and learning to understand one another without it feeling bland. It seems horrible to say, but sometimes niceness and everyone getting along really well can become boring. It's lovely to watch a friendship bloom, but too much and it feels sickly. The tweeness that never becomes anything other than nice. What I love about this is that we get to see just how strong their bond is. It feels fresh. Donna speaks to the Doctor in a way Rose or Martha never would, and it echoes back really nicely to her first appearance when she tells the Doctor he needs someone. Just such a lovely, lovely beginning to a character's journey. It's so well crafted, and it's one of those things that I think has been missing from the show for a while. If I had any gripes about Donna in the early episodes of the season, I think she cries a little bit too much. It's just in most of the episodes, and I think it kind of loses its power. It makes sense in the Pompeii one and the Ood one, but personally I would have cut it from the Sontaran two-parter. You can show her pain and fear without tears, and sometimes that's more powerful. Someone desperately trying not to cry is even more heartbreaking than when someone fully breaks down. It's a nitpick I know that some of you will not agree with, including Russell T Davies. I can imagine him slating me in the most theatrical of ways, but I'd give as good as I get. Bring it on, Russell. I think she cries too much. But I think these early episodes of the series do a great job at establishing its tone, mixing comedy and drama in a way that never feels disingenuous or out of place. You'll notice I haven't spoken about the Rose scene at the end of episode 1. We'll get to her in the series arc later, but just as contained episodes, I think they're all really strong. Also, I've always loved Planet of the Ood. I think it's a really underrated episode, and it really cements the Ood as one of these era's best creatures. I think they're just brilliant. Okay, let's talk about Martha returning. Early on in the series, we return to planet Earth to check in with Martha Jones and see how her life is going since she left the Doctor at the end of Series 3. I really like the little continuity here with her calling the Doctor like she promised she would. This era, even when it's following the Monster of the Week format, always managed to make everything feel connected. It flowed in a way that never alienated new viewers but also rewarded those who've been watching along, with little Easter eggs and character returns that meant something to the fans. It's nice, I like it. I also think it's great to go back to companions when they've left the TARDIS. There's just so much story to be told there, focusing on how travelling changed them, and I think pairing Martha, a woman who left on her own accord, with Donna, someone who was desperately trying to find the Doctor again ever since they first met, is a really lovely idea. It's that contrast and that little conflict, like I said, this series is great at conflict, that it just makes this so much richer. The little scene when Martha asks Donna if her family knows where she is perfect. It's a really big turning point for Donna, but also a great example of how Martha has changed and grown. It's simple character development executed perfectly. This two-parter does quite a good job at reintroducing the Sontarans in the modern era. I don't think it's as seamless as, say, the Daleks or the Cybermen, but there are some wonderful little things here. It captures their trait of them loving battle really well, and the moments of action are the exact kind of action you want in a two-parter like this. I don't think the plot is anything amazing, but it's entertaining, with small character scenes that elevate it above a standard Sontaran ROM. However, although I do like aspects of this redesign, I do think they're slightly too clean. I want to grubby them up a bit and make them look more like war-battled soldiers that they are. Again, it's a nitpick, but it's one I can never ignore when rewatching this story. I just feel like these guys have a skin routine, and that just feels wrong. My biggest issue with the story as a whole is mainly its use of Martha after the first act. Martha gets taken down to the basement by two clone soldiers and suddenly is face to face with this fucking thing. This design is amazing, by the way. I mean, just look at it. It's so horrible and gives you that instant reaction of fuck right off that it needs. It's great, I love it. But Martha is caught and turned into an evil clone, which she remains for the majority of the story. And although on paper this sounds fine, and to be honest, the episode does a good job at this story beat, I can't help but feel like it's a massive waste of the character's potential. As I said, a companion's life after the Doctor is just a concept brimming with stories. However, once you get rid of her for the clone plot, all that potential vanishes. I want to see actual Martha interacting with the Doctor more, interacting with Donna more, having an agency in the plot herself. I want to see more of this unit side of her and how that compares to how she was last season. The clone thing is fun, but it's not gripping. We know at the end Martha is going to be fine, so there's not much tension there. So it does kind of feel at times that we're just waiting for the Doctor to notice and fix it. And this is a shame because the bits we get of actual Martha are lovely, and maybe I'm being greedy, but I want more. And this might again feel a bit nitpicky, and to be honest, it kind of is. It's a very strong opening to a series that feels incredibly confident and aware of its popularity. There's barely an episode I don't like. Barely. Look, if you've made it this far through the video already, then you can kind of gather I think Series 4 is pretty damn strong. There'll be a few more nitpicks along the way. This is the series with the ultimate reset button, but mainly the episodes provide the fun, the scares, and the whimsy that I want from Doctor Who. All apart from this one. Now, I've seen people slate the Doctor's daughter before, and personally, I find that odd, because I just can't muster up much of an opinion on it. It's definitely not one I love and can talk about for days, but it's also not one I dislike enough to rant and rave about. It's just an episode of Doctor Who that has a slightly paint-by-numbers plot. Like, the performances are good, it looks alright, the Hath are quite cool, but it just happens. I feel its runtime, and I struggle to connect with any of it, and I don't know if that sounds harsh, I don't mean it to, it's just not for me. One of the main issues again is that it wastes Martha. Immediately it separates her from the Doctor and Donna, and they only reconnect right at the end. And this may have been fine if not for the Sontaran episodes, but they do the exact same thing. Both stories refuse to delve deep into the aftermath of travelling with a Doctor, which is just such a shame when there's so much you can explore with that. And Martha is very much treated like the B plot here. I wouldn't go as far as saying she's an afterthought, but I also wouldn't be surprised if the first draft of this script didn't include her. Her presence barely, if at all, affects the main plot of the story. It's Donna that works out the numbers, it's the Doctor that ends the conflict, and it's Martha that has to scramble around in some mud and watch a Hath drown. I'm not saying she needed a massive arc, but just maybe a bit more than that. I just want more. I'm being greedy again. I wanted more. I do really like the little scene at the end when Martha says goodbye once again. Here we get to see the differences between Martha and Donna. One person happy to be home while the other is adamant they'll never stop travelling. And this is kind of what I mean. This could have been so much more. There's so much to explore there. It's barely a criticism at this point and just a desperate wish that we got it. Another slightly weaker outing of the series is The Unicorn and the Wasp. Now, as a kid, I adored this episode, and I remember vividly pretending to be the Wasp Man, which is something I didn't have to admit on the internet, so I don't know why I just did. Over time, I don't find it as fun as I once did. I think it's the only time Donna feels really out of character. Her caring nature isn't there, which is weird when she is such a character who wears her heart on her sleeve. There are still really good moments in this. Tennant is such a good physical actor, and this one allows him to play slapstick at times, which he just excels in. And due to it being a comedy script, obviously Catherine Tate delivers the jokes perfectly, even though I do think some are out of place. Again, no major criticisms. I completely understand people who adore this episode, but for me, it's just good. It's a fine episode of Doctor Who. I do love the murder mystery aspect of it though. It just makes perfect sense to write that for Agatha Christie. And I quite like the giant wasp. Oh, I'm a simple man. Bug but big. Perfect. Why not? I think Silence in the Library, Forest of the Dead may be my favourite story that Moffat wrote for the RTD era. It's just crammed full of amazing ideas, fantastic characters, and monsters that are so perfect that I can never decide if I want them to come back or not. And there are so many scenes in this that are brimming with emotion, but they always feel earned. And what I mean by that, because I say it a lot, is that sometimes you can feel a writer trying too hard to make something sad, and you can almost begin to feel a story being manufactured to manipulate emotions from an audience. And it feels odd to say because all stories are manufactured, they're works of fiction. And it is the writer's job to make you feel something, but there's an art to it. A good script feels natural, as if the story was always destined to go that way, where a bad script will feel forced. Does that make sense? Yeah, sorry, I'm going to say that makes sense. This two-parter is just so well crafted. It's got that Moffat flair that his best scripts have, while also keeping in the tone with this era of the show. He gives our main protagonist so much stuff to do. Everyone in this episode goes on a journey, but never quite how you'd expect. Miss Evangelista is the perfect example of this. A character who starts a little dim, meaning well, but not particularly strong or clever, who suddenly becomes a genius Snapchat filter in the second part. That's a ridiculous way to describe that, but that's kind of what happens. The twists throughout the story work perfectly, never making us as the audience feel cheated or deceived. Donna's heart and wit is balanced incredibly well. Tennant is at his greatest, and of course is the first introduction to Riversong, a character that will soon become a staple of the Moffat era. Now, I have my issues with Riversong. I don't think her character is always smooth sailing, with at times her arc becoming too convoluted for my liking. But that's a discussion for another video. We're coming to the Moffat era very soon. But here, River's introduction is pitched perfectly. She's a bit of a mystery, but that's not her main purpose. Instead, she has a fully realised character who is intriguing right from the start. This woman who seems to know everything about the Doctor, although he knows nothing about her. That's a great story. That is sci-fi. It's also great to see the Doctor so out of his depth. This is the 10th Doctor's third series, so it's nice that we're still getting these stories that show our main character in a new light, challenging him at every turn. It's one of the hardest things to get right about the show. The Doctor is always the cleverest person in the room, and that can be incredibly hard to write. So giving him this character who confuses him from the off is a perfect way of disarming that intelligence. But also, the 10th Doctor is the perfect Doctor to first meet Riversong. Also, I know that Big Finish have done stories and stuff, but I'm talking just in terms of the TV show. As I've said before, the 10th Doctor is a horny boy. He's the one who falls in love much easier than a teenager, and he thinks everyone he meets is the one. Honestly, he'd be an amazing person on first dates. He's that kind of Doctor. He's the first date Doctor. He, in theory, is the perfect person to have a time-travelling wife. He is the right character to go on that emotional romantic journey. And yet, due to him meeting River out of sync, he can't trust her. He doesn't have those feelings, and that kind of scares him. And that is just great drama. The man who falls in love so easily can't trust the person he will one day fall in love with. And once again, this is conflict. This series is so good at character conflict, and this conflict allows us to get a really good understanding of Riversong. We see and feel her pain, we watch as she desperately tries to buy the Doctor's trust, and we believe her feelings of love even though we've never seen her before. It's just a perfect character introduction, and then he goes and kills her off, and the mystery continues. Will we ever see her again? What happens now? Who actually is she? All of that is just beautifully left to be explored on another day. Meanwhile, Donna gets a lovely subplot to herself as she lives in this uncanny valley world of the computer. There's so many little bits of that Moffat flair that just makes this plot so rich. The children all being the same kids is great. Dr. Moon is this wonderful guide through the madness, and then Murray Gold's almost too perfect score just has that little extra offness that's needed to really sell the world. It's a very grown-up story with still enough scares and whimsy to keep the kids entertained. And that's one of the greatest things about the second half of this season, is not afraid to go dark, leading to one episode that shouldn't have worked and yet maybe is one of the best stories in 60 years of the show. When I say that Midnight shouldn't have worked, I'm not being dramatic. It's mainly set in one room, barely any special effects or makeup or weird visual stuff. It's a concept that really should fall flat on its arse within 2 minutes. Repeating words should not work as a Doctor Who monster, not as basic as that anyway. You'd think it would have to be so outlandishly weird for that concept to work. However, Midnight really strips back all the weird and wacky whimsy of the show, forcing its characters in one location and having to deal with someone copying what they say like a child does when they want to be annoying. And it's fucking brilliant. It really is an episode that proves that Doctor Who can try its hand at anything. What other show could do this concept justice like this? It's just a razor-sharp script, paced brilliantly as the tension and conflict grows and grows until it reaches boiling point. Not a single word is wasted, not a single character feels out of place and pointless. The performances, the music, the directing, everything just working alongside each other to create just a brilliant, relentless 45 minutes. And that's the word for this one, relentless. This episode just constantly turns up the dial. First she copies, then she speaks at the same time, and then she steals your voice. It just never lets up. Now, I would never tell a writer to study the script unlike I would for some other RTD works. This script is an odd one, like even visually on the page you can tell it's unique. However, I would tell writers to study the mechanics of its storytelling. The slow-paced beginning, allowing the audience to get an understanding of the characters, is marvellous because it feeds you all the information you need as a viewer without ever being boring. And that's a very hard thing to write. I can't tell you how many scripts I've read that are so boring to start with because it's all basic, plain character introductions. Russell T Davies has always been incredibly good at introducing characters. I know some people haven't liked his latest era, me included, it has its problems, but I've seen people say that this means that RTD isn't a good writer, and I'm sorry, that's nonsense. You may not like his new style or vision for Doctor Who, but to discredit all his other work because of it is, in my opinion, lazy critique. The first 15 minutes of It's a Sin is a masterclass of character introduction, perfectly setting up the story as it goes. Same in A Very English Scandal, same in Years and Years, Cucumber, Queer as Folk. He's just very good at it, and it's evident here in Midnight. This is a standalone 45-minute episode, and yet by the end, you know all these characters. You know the ones that the experience will have changed, the ones that will pretend it never happened. You know their way of life, their way of dealing with trauma. Valerie has secrets she will take to the grave. That is a woman who has switched on a dime many times throughout her life. This isn't just a good Doctor Who script, but it's a masterclass how to use all the different elements and beats of a story. Also, I need to quickly praise the editing as well. This must have been an absolute ball ache to edit. This whole episode hinges on that final cut. Any sloppy editing and the whole thing would have collapsed. Every moment had to be meticulously chosen. The sound mixing had to be perfect. Not a single member of the production team had an easy time on this one, and the results prove that. The work is on the screen and it is just a triumph. Okay, pause button. Before we continue with the episodes, let's jump back a bit and talk about the series arc and one particular blonde lady. I want to take you back to the 5th of April 2008. It's 6:20 in the evening and episode 1 of Doctor Who Series 4 has just started on BBC One. The iconic theme music blares out of your cheap TV speakers and you know for the next 45 minutes you're safe. It's just you, the Doctor, Donna and the stars. You giggle at the silliness of the adipose and fall instantly in love with Bernard Cribbins. You're desperate for the Doctor and Donna to spot each other, letting out an angry gasp every time they miss one another. You're in awe of the spaceship over London and you're just happy to know that your silly little blue box show is back and still as mesmerising as you remembered. And then Rose Tyler turns around and you nearly fucking die. The shocking appearance of Billie Piper may be one of the greatest little twists in Doctor Who history. A collective gasp went across the UK when she turned around, and suddenly we just knew we were in for a big series of telly. Over the course of the series, we waited for more answers, with her popping up occasionally throughout the build-up to the final. During this painful wait, we heard little glimpses of clues, including missing planets, disappearing bees, and something being on Donna's back. And although it's not a detailed, complicated, constructed arc that runs across the series, it may be one of the best build-ups Russell ever did for the show. While Bad Wolf and Torchwood were incredibly obvious and the Saxon mentions built up over time, Series 4 was a little subtler in its approach. You'd be forgiven for missing the mentions of all the missing planets. "There's something on your back" that's mentioned in the fires of Pompeii is just a fun, creepy phrase that you may have forgotten before it becomes meaningful. I feel like this series has a lot of fun with its hints, and it's probably one of the best to watch with someone new and watch them realise things as they go along. And then when it comes to Rose, I know people have their issues with her, definitely when her presence feels incredibly strong throughout Series 3, but her returning here does work incredibly well in my opinion, because it's not just a cheap trick for the audience. There is a promise of story here. It does matter. We know the Doctor is desperate to see her again. We know the reunion they would have, and we can't help but root for it. It's not just fueled by getting people talking. Of course, that's part of it, and rightly so. Word of mouth is incredibly important when it comes to TV, but it's rooted in emotion, in a story that's been being told ever since the start of this era. So let's talk about what may be the bleakest episode in the show's history, or at least one of them. Turn Left is another relentless episode, incredibly political, ferociously angry at times, depicting some of the worst traits of humanity. There's barely anything family-friendly about it. There's little nuggets of humour, but they are very few and far between as Russell T Davies throws Donna into a descent of pain and desperation. It's an incredibly grown-up piece of telly, and kind of hilarious that it's the same show and writer that would one day go on to write Space Babies. That's nuts. Once again, although there are many sci-fi elements to the story, the weirdness and the wackiness of the show is stripped away to tell a very raw, very human tale. If there's one word to describe this one, I think it would have to be brave, even braver than Midnight in my opinion. So far, Series 4 had been full of monsters, full of scares and good alien chases, so to suddenly put the brakes on all that and instead offer a detailed character piece just before the two-part finale is something that I don't know if many showrunners would have had the guts to do. And it is a risk. I can imagine many kids finding this one difficult. Annoyingly, I can't remember my reaction to this one as a kid, which is a shame. I think I liked it. I think I probably needed a few things explained, but I think I liked it. But in my opinion, the risk of this episode paid off, with Donna really being able to grow as a character. And that's a big thing about this episode. It really does go back to the beginning, with Donna just before she met the Doctor. All that character development that has been done has to be done all over again. But this time you don't have the luxury of 10 plus episodes to do it. You've got 45 minutes and you've got to juggle Donna and the actual plot, Wilf, her mum Silvia, Rose's proper return. It's such a busy episode. And that's before you even get to all the hard-hitting themes of it. And yet it never feels cluttered. It flows so effortlessly that everything is allowed its time to breathe and sit. Catherine Tate is obviously stunning in this episode. Every decision she makes just either makes you laugh or it breaks your heart. And it really shut up anyone that was still saying she was just a comedy actress. And I can't stand that anyway. Just a comedy actor or whatever. I just think that's so fucking snobby. Comedy is hard. Comedy is really tough. And your timing has to be stupidly good. And you also need to have a way of phrasing things. And it's a skill. It's a real skill. I can't stand that we sometimes look down on comedy, especially when some of the greatest sitcoms have come out of this country. Like, we should celebrate comedy so much more. Also, comedic actors are usually pretty good at drama. Comedy is only one step away from tragedy, so it doesn't surprise me that Catherine Tate killed it in this role. Right, this feels like a good time to talk about the Noble family. Let's start with Silvia. Silvia Noble is a weird one. She is kind of meant to be unlikable. She isn't meant to be as warm as, say, Jackie Tyler was. She is quite cold, quite sharp and hard at times, and I think that's okay. I never know with Silvia. Personally, I think she could have been toned down a bit and it would have still worked. I actually think I prefer her in the 60th. I think she's much softer and easier to watch. And that's not me saying I don't like flawed characters. Characters should be flawed, otherwise they're boring. But in Series 4, I don't know, I struggle with her a bit. Sometimes she's incredibly mean, other times she's jumping for joy with Wilf and it's light and joyous. And I don't think it's really character development. Her characterization just changes. I don't know. Honestly, let me know in the comments what you think of her, because I find her a difficult character to discuss. Sometimes I like her, other times I don't quite get what they're going for. Wilf, on the other hand, is a god amongst men. Played by the wonderful Bernard Cribbins, Wilf is a warm hug of a character, effortlessly charming and likeable with a cheeky glint in his eye. He lights up the screen, and anytime he's in an episode, it suddenly immediately gets better. I think Wilf may be one of my favourite RTD characters of all time. He's just so watchable, with a heart and a wit that shines through in every scene. Also, I love that we get this older recurring character in this big, mad sci-fi show. And unlike some shows that treat the older character as a bit of a joke, Wilf is shown so much respect by the scripts. He feels so real, so lived, and is the perfect character for a family show. So many people connected with him, from the older generation all the way to little kids, and that's just such a remarkable thing for both a writer and an actor to achieve. I think a lot of it's down to his eyes. Bernard Cribbins just had wonderful eyes for the screen. They're so emotive and expressive that they worked so well on camera. The camera loved him. And that's a weird thing people say a lot, but it is true. His personality really came through in everything he was in. And Russell and the writing team captured that personality perfectly in the character of Wilf. I don't think you could have asked for a better actor to play this character. I think it was just a brilliant bit of casting. In Turn Left, the Noble family is used brilliantly. It's definitely Silvia's best episode. Her descent into crippling depression is just an amazing bit of telly, and although it barely takes up any of the runtime, it sticks with you long after watching. My favourite scene in the whole episode is when she talks about the woman in the shop and the possibility of her being dead. It's such a small moment, shot incredibly simply, that it just lets the performance and the dialogue shine. I adore scenes like this, little snapshots of life, moments that are so tiny and raw. Meanwhile, Wilf takes a very different approach, constantly trying to keep spirits up, that keep calm and carry on way of living from his war days. However, over time he can't keep it up, realising that there's just no saving them. What I love about this episode is the theme of death just hangs over it. It's like a ghost that haunts our characters. One by one, we are told that these people we once loved are dying, and it's building towards the ultimate sacrifice. It's just a grown-up drama. This is Russell writing years and years, way before he did. I mean, I think there's a few little nitpicks. I think it's fair to say that the Time Beetle looks a bit shit, but honestly, who cares? When a story is this strong, you can put up with a plastic-looking beetle, and if you can't, then Doctor Who probably isn't the show for you. Nowadays, we can be a bit harsher, definitely with the Disney money involved, but 2008, give him a fucking break. Now, some people would call what I'm doing right now a segue, but I like to just say that we're spinning off into a different direction. Before we can talk about the final, we need to quickly look at the Whoniverse as a whole and the two spin-off shows that were created during the RTD tenure. Torchwood and the Sarah Jane Adventures are incredibly different shows, with Torchwood aimed at a more adult demographic, while Sarah Jane was shown on the CBBC, for an even more child-friendly version of Doctor Who. And I think Sarah Jane is actually the better show. It's definitely more consistent. Sarah Jane Adventures found its tone and style pretty much from the off, while Torchwood stumbled around a bit, sometimes trying too hard to be racy and shocking for that 9 PM slot. Now, there's some great episodes of Torchwood, and I think Series 3 is a brilliant piece of television in general. I think Children of Earth is just fantastic. But Sarah Jane just felt more sure of itself, while Torchwood, definitely in its early series, always felt like it had something to prove. I will say that both shows had a great ensemble, with really strong characters that grew and developed over time. I think Gwen Cooper is one of the best characters from the Whoniverse, and it's such a shame she's barely appeared in the main show. But for me, the most impressive thing about both spin-offs is the fact they happened at all. When Doctor Who first came back in 2005, people really thought it was going to flop. And then suddenly, a few years later, the main show is attracting 13 million viewers some episodes, with 2 successful spin-offs with their own loyal fan bases. And that's not even mentioning all the merch that was everywhere. It's kind of amazing to think about it. I know people look at the show now and wonder why it's not like this anymore, and although yeah, I think the show should and could be a lot more successful than it is at the moment, thinking it could just go back to this is kind of unrealistic. And it's not even just that times have changed. Like, yeah, they have, TV is more expensive to make now, blah blah blah, but it's just that moment when it came back was lightning in a bottle. It was a miracle that kind of couldn't have been planned. I will say that I think people are far too lenient on viewing figures nowadays. Those 13 million people that once watched still do exist, and although yes, viewing habits have changed with streaming and TikTok, people haven't. People still fear missing out on something, but people aren't worried about missing out on Doctor Who. And for me, that's where the problem lies. But that's a conversation for another day. Let's talk about Daleks. There is so much to talk about in this 2-part final, so I'll try to keep this as concise as possible. Firstly, I think it's amazing how well the first part brings all the characters into the action. There's so much to juggle here, so much to set up, and I think for the most part, it does a really good job. Making the Doctor off-world for the most of it, allowing the characters to exist without him, is a really smart choice. It makes them feel just as important to the story, and not like the Doctor's backup dancers, which when you bring this many people into one story, you can definitely fall into that trap. There's just some wonderful scenes in this as the tension begins to grow. That moment when they all hear exterminate over the speakers is just brilliant, allowing each character to have their own individual reaction of terror just heightens that tension even more. Russell was always good with the Daleks. He knew how to make them matter, how to make them have this presence in the story. There's just so much suspense in this episode, this constant teasing of moments that you as an audience are desperate to see, especially with Rose finally reaching the Doctor. That's kind of agony at times, the more and more that's teased. Harriet Jones returning is a lovely little detail. I adore how all the characters basically lose all hope and then very quickly they all spring into action one by one. I just think part 1 is incredibly well crafted. It's spinning a lot of plates, it's setting up a lot of things, but it's exciting and entertaining enough that it doesn't feel like setup. Davros's reintroduction to the show is really well handled too. It's pretty seamless. It doesn't feel bogged down in too much history or explanations, yet still feels very loyal to the classic character. And reactions. I want to talk about the reactions in this episode, because it gives time for our characters to genuinely react to stuff. I feel like recently, and this isn't just with Doctor Who, but a lot of media, there is this constant need to keep things moving, charging forward really fast, that we're not given time to really see and sit with our characters' reactions. And it's so important. Seeing how characters react helps an audience engage with a story. Plot isn't everything. It's important, of course, but if no one reacts to that plot, then it can very quickly become meaningless. It becomes a clip show of events rather than a story with passion and loss and love and fear and all that nonsense. And there is a genuine epicness about this one, with the Daleks invading Earth and all our favourite characters returning. As I've said already, the show was incredibly confident at this point, and this is kind of the payoff of that. This team up, this big epic, is earned because the work has been put in over the last 4 years. And before we can talk about part 2, we have to talk about the cliffhanger, that fucking cliff. People died. People died in shock. I mean, it's the ultimate pull of the heartstrings, and it works. It just works. This reunion with Rose has been teased since Partners in Crime, so this shocking pull of the rug, it just gets you. And I know some people think the resolution to this is a bit of a cop-out, and honestly, even if you think that, I think it's worth it. We were always going to get a cliffhanger like this one day, and it just makes sense to do it in an episode with the Daleks and Davros and the Avengers teaming up. Also, with the viewing figures the show was getting at the time, it's the perfect opportunity. It's just something you'd want to do as a fan and a writer, and with the popularity Tennant did have, again, perfect time to shock and worry people. I do think this is just a great cliffhanger, and the resolution, though a bit silly, still works for me. Like, I don't think a new actor as the Doctor would work here at all. We need the payoffs with these characters. Journey's End is a little more interesting. I think the emotional stuff is all brilliant. Again, this era just got that from the beginning and it never slacked on it. A lot of the stuff can be forgiven due to the character work being so strong. But first of all, a few critiques I've seen that I don't agree with. I've seen some people say that the Osterhagen key never goes anywhere, and I don't think that's quite true. It's not used massively in the plot. I will agree a lot of time is dedicated to it and eventually doesn't really result in any kind of resolution, but it has still got a purpose. It's just a lot more cemented in character. The Osterhagen key allows us to see just how far Martha will go, and it allows for that moment when the Doctor sees what he turns people into. Without something as awful as the Osterhagen key, this moment just wouldn't land. I also love that Rose, someone who's always kind of got the Doctor, thinks Martha is brilliant, at first not noticing just how hurt and scared the Doctor is. Also, Martha saying, "Oh my god, he found you," is just a lovely little detail. I love how it shows Martha's growth and yet still a love for the Doctor, although no longer romantic. She's grown. She's grown up. For me, the story begins to get messy towards the resolution. The ending with Donna just pressing a lot of buttons has never worked for me. I understand that they give her a good reason in the script to suddenly become a super genius, they put the work in to make that bit make sense, but that doesn't stop the ending just being multiple reset buttons. There's tons of gobbledygook sci-fi language to try to cover it up, but it is just solved by pressing buttons and flicking switches. And I would say this ending is there because they wrote themselves into a corner, but they didn't. They actually gave themselves a better resolution early on, and they even go to do it and then decide against it. We are told that Davros put a little bit of himself in every Dalek. His DNA runs through them. The Daleks are all connected through him. That's how you destroy them, surely. Yes, it's a kill one of them and they all die, however the script actually gives a reason why that would work. And I still, to this day, do not understand why they didn't go with that option. I wonder if they thought it was too obvious, but if a story is naturally going in that direction, changing it just makes no sense. I think something with his DNA is much better than just flicking switches and sending the Daleks spinning. And look, it doesn't ruin the whole story for me, although I am very aware that part of that will be down to nostalgia. I think it would be really disingenuous of me to suggest that I have no nostalgia for this era. This was my era of Doctor Who. I was 8 when this series aired and I was obsessed. And not just as a fan, but as a future creative. It started a passion for acting and writing, and I can look back and see how Doctor Who influenced all my goals. And I think that's true of any era. I have a lot of issues with the Chibnall stuff, but if that was a kid's first introduction to the show, I can imagine them having a lot of nostalgia for it, and I would never take that away from them. I can't relate to it, I don't necessarily get it, but that's fine. I also try and be fair. You'll see I do try and balance praise and criticism, even for eras and episodes I love. And this is one of them. I adore the epicness of the story. I have so much nostalgia for it, but the ending is a letdown. I do have a massive soft spot for all the characters flying the TARDIS. It is joyous, and yeah, it is a bit twee, but I'll allow it. Definitely with the ending that we're heading towards, I think a lovely moment like that softens it slightly. Another issue I have with this episode is Rose's ending. Again, I don't hate it, but I do think it's a lot weaker than her original goodbye in Doomsday, which is annoying. You always want things to grow and get better, and this does kind of undermine the emotion of her original goodbye. I am very glad they cut certain things out of this scene. If you don't know, originally they were going to have the Doctor give Rose and the Meta Crisis part of the TARDIS, so they could grow their own one and travel around in the parallel world, and that's just far too much. Rose does need to lose something, and at least she loses the chance to travel through space and time. Giving her everything she ever wanted would just be far too twee and easy. It would kind of have the same issue I have with Regeneration. Things need to end, and when they don't, and you know there's another Doctor just knocking about with a TARDIS travelling, it loses any sense of actual loss. Speaking of loss, right, I'm going to ignore Donna's return in the 60th when discussing this. We'll talk about that another day. Donna's exit here is heartbreaking, and in my opinion, it is completely necessary. You can't have an epic story like this two-parter with a Doctor saving the universe without some sort of loss or tragedy attached to it. It also really works for Donna's character arc. She's a character who never believed in herself, who slowly over time came to realise just how important she was. However, once you get to that point, once she becomes the Dr. Donna, there's nowhere else to go with that character. The story is done, the journey is complete, but you can't just leave her like that. It would make no sense. So stripping that away is just the perfect ending for both her and the Doctor. This is the woman who told him he needs someone, and he agreed with her and brought her along for an adventure, and eventually that leads him to having to wipe her memory. The person he needed, the person who got him and became his best friend, can no longer remember him. He basically becomes a ghost. Also, this is another great bit of screenwriting to study. Not a single word is wasted in the action lines. They're so short, but they convey everything. This one in particular is just a great action line. He goes closer to her. She's almost scared of him. It's so simple, but it just tells you everything. This scene almost makes me forgive the button pressing ending. Almost. It doesn't, but almost. And then that's the end of Series 4. I'll talk about the Tennant specials in a minute, but first, this is it. The Doctor drops Donna home, he explains to her family what happens, Wilf breaks your heart one last time, and then the episode ends. The last line in the script is literally all the time in the world and all alone. That's a ridiculous ending for a family show. There's no final little twist, no what, it just lets it sit. There was meant to be, 2 Cybermen were meant to jump the Doctor, but thankfully they cut it. And it's this simplicity of the ending that shows just how grown up the storytelling in this season was. Series 4 is full of fun and great characters and stories and family-friendly stuff, but it's never dumbed down. It still tells raw, emotional, gripping tales. It deals with heavy themes and good scares, and it treats its audience as intelligent. It has a lot of respect for family viewing. It's proud that it can offer something for everyone, and it does it extremely well. Series 4 is beloved for a reason. It's not overrated, it's incredibly well crafted, with some of the best stories from the shows. The specials, however, aren't as easy to praise. The next Doctor is fine. I think it's a fine Christmas special. Having to follow such a sad ending does actually harm it a little bit. I think the episode struggles with tone at times. It can't just ignore what came before, but it also doesn't want to be too heavy for Christmas Day viewing, and it leaves it a little bit confused. I think there's some nice moments, and the performances are great, but as an episode, there's not much to say about it. Planet of the Dead is an episode that exists. For me, it's the worst offender of the forced romance plot that takes up a lot of this era. I do not like the character of Christina. Nothing against the actress, I think she does her best, but I just find this character annoying. I don't believe the romance or the flirtatious banter at all, and I don't think she and the Doctor have good chemistry. It feels forced. I've said this before, but the sudden romantic, flirtatious flings at times can feel like a trope of the show, and here it's evident. It really does feel like we're doing an Easter special, we need a Doctor to fancy someone and someone to fancy him. And it takes up so much of the runtime. We're on a planet of the dead. There is giant fly people and killer stingrays, and yet we focus so much on this romance that's obvious will never go anywhere from the beginning. I do like that the Doctor doesn't have a full-time companion in these specials. That's a nice addition to his arc. He's lost so many people that he refuses to do it again. I love that. I think giving him someone for each individual episode works too. We get to see lots of different dynamics, but for me, this one is weak, and it does ruin the episode for me because I can never see past all the sad attempts at flirting. There's some good things. The unit subplot is quite well handled. The effects look pretty good, but this is a weaker outing, especially after the highs of Series 4. And then, because the show's nuts, the next episode decides to be one of the greatest ever, with amazing monsters and great characters and themes running through it. It's insane. The quality difference here is insane. It's night and day. The Waters of Mars is another script that just builds and builds, turning up tension and suspense at every turn, while developing the Doctor's arc even further. I know some people think the Time Lord Victoria stuff comes out of nowhere, but I don't really agree. The 10th Doctor has always been arrogant and selfish and a show-off, and now he's grieving again and he's pissed off at the world and he decides he's had enough. I think this darkness has always been under the surface of this incarnation, and I think they play it incredibly well here. The supporting cast is amazing. I like how well established the characters are. I also love that there's secrets and stories between them that we never understand or get to know. I just adore it when stories do that. It makes it feel so much richer and lived in. The monster design is amazing. I remember being terrified and mesmerised by the Flood when I was young. These are creatures that I would happily have come back one day, only if the story would do them justice. I also think it's really funny that this episode was originally thought about for a Christmas special. That would have been nuts. It's far too dark and different for Christmas. You can't have that ending alongside your turkey. And the fact this episode delves so deeply into the 10th Doctor's flaws is quite a brave thing to do for his penultimate episode. I know people find his last story too self-indulgent, and we'll get to that, but you've got to remember this came first, and that's quite risky, to show your main character in a bad light right before the end. Like, he kind of goes off his head in this one, and he's scared of dying, and I think that's just an interesting place to take the character. I know some don't like Regeneration being treated like death, but personally I do. I think that's just a good narrative. I prefer it to Regeneration having no consequences, like I feel like the show does now. So, I don't know, there's a balance. But okay, here we go. I am tired. So let's do it. We're near the end of the video and the end of the first RTD era. So let's discuss End of Time Part 1 and 2. The End of Time is kind of hilarious. It's just everything that the RTD era was shoved into 2 episodes. It's got all the highs of the character work and the gripping dialogue, and all the nonsense of the coincidental plot beats and ridiculous ideas. And we'll get into what doesn't work, but there is something just endearing about its nonsense at times. It's such an odd story, and it's got everything in it. Weird skeleton master in a hoodie, the Time Lords, talking cacti, Donna, Wilf, the Ood, everyone turning into John Sim, scenes with the Doctor dealing with grief, scenes with the Doctor dealing with an old woman pinching his ass. It's insane. It's batshit. Like, there's so much ridiculous stuff in here. The Cult of Saxon, or whatever they're called, is so stupid. The fact they get the Master's DNA off Lucy's lips, like, wash your face, what's wrong with you? The whole scene is nuts. It's just overdone, even a little overacted, but it weirdly fits the tone they're going for, definitely early on in this episode. But yet, in all its epicness, in all its ideas, such as the Master and the Time Lords returning, it's the smaller, intimate scenes that really shine. Wilf is just kind of mesmerising in this. In every scene where he and the Doctor just sit and chat and discuss their lives and mortality, the whole thing just comes together suddenly. It's amazing that these are the moments that people remember when there was so much else happening around them. And it is a testament to both David Tennant and Bernard Cribbin's performances, as well as Russell's knack of dialogue. These scenes just sing, and it's some of the most powerful moments we've had in the show. The bit where Wilf begs the Doctor to take the gun is just perfectly realised. You feel for both of them in that scene, and to stop a big New Year's special and just hold on 2 actors like this is something that I don't think they do now, and I think that's a massive shame. Wilf's faith in the Doctor is really nicely explored. It's almost a blind faith. He really thinks this man is wonderful and can solve and fix anything. And then pairing that with a Doctor who is kind of lost, down in his dumps and terrified of the end is just a wonderful contrast. And of course we get the he'll knock 4 times. That may be the best twist Russell wrote for the show. I just like how simple it is, and yet it really packs a punch. I remember this, like all these years later, I still remember the feeling of shock that gave me and how exciting it was that a drama made me feel that way as a kid. I quite like the Doctor's rant and rave before he realises he must save him, because he was always going to save him. People say this bit's cruel, but I think it's so in character for the Doctor we've been watching since he wiped Donna's memories. The other major thing that gets spoken about a lot is the victory lap the Doctor takes before regenerating. Some people hate this. I know they think it's incredibly self-indulgent, and yeah, it is. But I think it works for two reasons. One, they kind of earned it. It's not every day you bring your childhood show back and make it an instant success again. But also, it is still rooted in story and character. This Doctor is grieving and scared, and he's the one who needs someone, so he visits his friends for one last time, and I think that's lovely. And then you have the bittersweetness that even after visiting everyone, he still regenerates alone. His home blows up around him. He leaves, never quite coming to terms or accepting everything he faced. There's a sentimentality to it, 100%, but it's sad and bittersweet, and I prefer that to a happy, everything's fine ending for a Doctor that I don't believe ever would have been written like that. And I understand a lot of people will disagree with me on this, and I'm not saying I want every regeneration to be like this. I love Ninth's due to its subtlety, but this does work for me. It goes on, it's perhaps a tad too long, but for the most part, I feel like it's earned. And then Matt Smith turns up, but that's a story for another day. The RTD era is an interesting one to discuss, and I've actually really enjoyed making these 4 videos. There is so much to praise and yet so much to debate, but I think the one thing that must be celebrated is how well they managed to bring the show back to being beloved by the public. They went all out with some amazing stories and spin-offs and more merch than anyone should ever be able to afford, and that's super impressive. They gave us 2 wonderful Doctors, a trio of fabulous companions, and I love how monsters and aliens were at the front of this era. They were exciting and new and different. It's an era I will forever hold dear to my heart, and one day when I have kids, I will show them it and I will watch it through completely different eyes and fall in love with it all over again for a completely different reason. Next time, however, we have Series 5. Moffat's had a promotion, we've got a new Doctor, a new companion, new TARDIS, intro vibe, feel and monsters, and we'll be diving into it all.